Welcome everybody. Welcome to Creator Chat number 7. Today we have Oz here with us. Oz has done tons of awesome stuff with VR, really cool drone shots. He started the ResearchVR podcast, which is a great resource for learning tons about the space. So we're excited to have you, and thanks for joining in.
Appreciate it.
So let's start off with the question that we always ask people. How did you get into VR, AR? What got you stoked about the space?
Check this out. It was actually at SVVR, the place that we're in right now. It was like back in like 2014, I think. I went to an SVVR meetup like really early on. Maybe like probably like 7 or 8 or something, like number 7. I think they're like in the 40s, 50s, 60s now. Mm-hmm. And I tried out a DK1 with Hydra. I think that was the first experience that I tried, and it was like this almost like a John Woo type of shooting range. And I realized that I could like flip the guns to the side and like go like John Woo, and I was like, that blew my mind. Second thing I tried was a fake Star Wars ripoff experience where you have the Jedi training ball, that shoots lasers at you, and you get to deflect those lasers. And then I wrote my name on the ground with a lightsaber, and I was like, wait, you can do all these things? Cool. Blew my mind. But like, it didn't really settle in until I was like taking a class on visual perception in school, and we were talking about like about the limits of your eyes, of your vision, how all these things work. And it all kind of culminated at the end of the course when we talked about virtual reality, and it made sense of why we learned all these things about the limits of your perception and how VR takes advantage of those things.
Yeah.
And so when I learned that, I was like, wait, there's so much that I can apply in terms of like the neuroscience that I'd learned into this new emerging form of technology. Totally. That kind of birthed ResearchVR, which is like very much the science behind virtual reality. Mm-hmm. So
let's talk about that, because that's the ResearchVR podcast, as we talked about before. It's just a great repository of, not just why VR is exciting for entertainment and games, but how it's really interesting from a cognitive science perspective, bio, just tons of cool applications of VR in different ways. What are some of the points, thinking about like the work that you've seen, that really stand out to you? We have some people who are tuning in, maybe they've never seen the podcast or listened to it. What are some highlights that you've seen?
The highlights have been us kind of like going deeper with academics and talking a little bit about the science that they are working so hard to produce. And unfortunately, what happens a lot with academia is that the research just stays within the circle of research and just does not translate. It doesn't go out, because like researchers love to use a lot of jargon as well. Just like they want to like show off to their other professors and everyone else in academia. Is just like to have 2-sentence long titles of their research papers.
I feel like that's even the headsets. They were locked away in academic labs for like 50 years. These $100,000 or $500,000 setups, and then boom, Rift.
And then Rift comes along. And so my originally the intent with ResearchVR was to kind of like take all these like really interesting neuroscience principles and like feed them to developers in a very easily consumable way, and through like forms of conversation and sometimes video. So that was kind of like the driving force. And the things that really interested us in the beginning were things like how this kind of relates back to like the Stanford prison experiment, where like wearing a certain uniform changes your behavior in terms of how you interact with things around you. And so if the Stanford prison experiment was that there just all these students were put into different groups, the prisoners and the prison guards, and suddenly the prison guards became way more abusive. They literally like embodied the avatar of what a prison guard would be. And so that really interested us, and there's a lot of research built on top of that. And so VR obviously has a lot of relation to that, where you're embodying different avatars, and if you realize what avatar you are, how that changes your behavior.
So how could you use that in a VR app or experience, you think?
I think you have the problem of like not really knowing what you look like, and so something like a mirror and actually giving you initially that like push to customize your avatar, become what you want to be. And even this was an interesting effect. The height of the avatar matters actually in terms of the effect that it has on your behavior. So taller avatars ended up behaving more confidently and like more aggressively than shorter avatars. So those things can translate into like how you want to create an experience, and especially if it's a social VR experience, how all these things affect each other. Another interesting thing that I ran into was the research of proxemics, which is the research of like how interpersonal distances are kept.
Yeah. I've never heard of this one. Proxemics?
Proxemics, yeah, and it's the Stanford Jeremy Bailenson. Actually, he has some good research on this. He's famous now for like a lot of VR research out there, and they had just looked at like how people keep distances, but like smaller when it's closer friends, further apart when it's strangers. And this like way back, I think like a year and a half ago, I wrote something on my website kind of like culminating all this research into one article and talking about like how we need to have these social bubbles in social VR apps so that we don't have the issues that that we've seen popping up now. And I had pitched it to Altspace, but I kind of ignored it for a while until the whole CNN article came out with like the issues that a woman had in a social VR experience, which is totally true, and like you need to be very aware of those. So
I've been moving slightly closer.
Yeah, I can tell. It's getting a little bit.
But you maintained your ground, so
I'm comfortable with you. We're already such good friends now.
Nice. So yeah, that's really cool stuff. I think it's important to keep all that in mind, especially as you guys are developing games, content, all sorts of entertainment. What's really cool about having you here today and also the work that you're doing is there's just so much stuff that has already been discovered, and VR is new to the consumer space, but I think your work makes it pretty clear that there's lots of past learnings that we can use so that we don't have to rebuild the wheel. So thanks for sharing that.
Totally. I mean, it's not my work. I'm just kind of the middleman, like pulling all the research and then like trying to give it out to people. So like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, right, of these incredible academics. And things like foveated rendering would not even have been conceptually possible if like people hadn't studied how your eyes actually worked and known how to take advantage of like specific things that. So your eyes are like super deceptive, right? Like your eyes totally don't work the same way that you think they do. You think you see such a clear individual beautiful thing, but like your brain just fills in so many of those gaps. And so foveated rendering just takes advantage of the fact that anything past this like 10 degrees that's your fovea, your focus point, everything else is like very much lower resolution, higher contrast when it comes to edges, which is why you can't just like down res the edges of the screen and have that work the same way. But it's by those principles that I think we are starting to implement these hacks into headsets that are going to make it easier and more cheaper for people to use them.
Yeah.
So it was really neat. I think most recently, though, I've been really getting into photogrammetry, and I think there's a huge amount of interest in this space. I've gotten into it from drone angles. Like I go and scan out like cliff sides and valleys and kind of mountain ranges, and then have it as a 3D model that you could kind of manipulate in AR or kind of be in true scale in VR. But like the ability for that to trigger memory, I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
We barely know, we know very little about it so far.
Well, that's a good segue into what I wanted to ask next. On the channel, we're a huge fan of people sharing what they're building and creating so that you can get feedback from others. So it's something that you've been working on recently that you want to share with the group.
Sure. Definitely photogrammetry has become like taken over my just my brain and what I want to concentrate on. And for the past couple of episodes on ResearchVR, we've kind of talked a little bit about it. I think with photogrammetry, you have suddenly like you unlock you can kind of get past the uncanniness within VR, although you have a tendency to fall into the uncanny valley, because I guess I should probably explain what photogrammetry is.
Some people tuning in, maybe they don't know what photogrammetry is. Even I could probably use some detailed description.
It's a way of 3D scanning an environment just by using cameras. And actually you can just do it with one camera. And you basically take pictures overlapping like 50 or 60% overlap between the photos, and then you put it all into a software that magically figures out like where those pictures were taken from, even without GPS coordinates, and reconstructs the geometry of the thing that you took pictures of.
Yeah.
So whether it's interior of a room or like the exterior of a house with something like a drone or something.
So let's break it down a bit. If I wanted to, say, construct using photogrammetry a model of a room in my house, what's the fastest, easiest way that I could do that? Is there a way for just the standard average Joe to do that?
With Tango, actually, the Google Tango phones, you can do a lot of that kind of instantly, which is really interesting. That's something I want to explore more. I just don't have enough like funds to buy phones and do them. But traditionally, it's been using any type of camera, taking individual pictures of whatever you want to scan and dropping it into a PC, into software that kind of puts it together. But now the instant scanning apps, so Google Tango has like the Constructor app, I think is one, that can instantly kind of like scan something and give you an OBJ result.
So will that take the pictures for you?
It does that with also, so I don't think it needs to do all the calculation just based on photos because it has the internal depth sensing, you know, like IR based camera.
Yeah.
So you'll end up getting lower resolution results, but yeah, it's basically doing that instantly and giving you the model that you can upload to Sketchfab and like give it out for people to download instantly.
Cool.
So one cool thing I've seen with that is like people, rather than taking pictures of their food, they're scanning the actual plate and like the full food, and then you can then have that be life-size version that you can kind of take a look at and explore. So
Awesome.
I've approached it from like a very artistic angle, like where photogrammetry can be used with art and like tilt brush. On top of that, like fusing both the real and the virtual, but also from like a virtual tourism angle. I worked with like realities.io, which are like, they have like one of the best photogrammetry apps on Steam VR.
Really good stuff on that.
And then we'll releasing the Armenia update for that app pretty soon, actually.
Oh, nice.
So I was
definitely want to check that out.
Scan like really old historic places, basically, for people to walk around in VR.
All right, cool. Well, we have one more question, and then we'll move it over to the chat question. So as our close, one of our favorite questions to ask is if you could build anything with VR or AR, what would you want to build?
Like, are we keeping this like realistic?
No. Go wild. Anything.
Okay, so let's go really all out. I want to be able to like take just the photos that you have, because we have trillions of photos taken every year, be able to not only like estimate depth, which can be done now. There's a lot of research from just like single picture depth estimation, but like let's just put buzzwords in here, like using deep learning, like understand the environment that's taken in, understand from the EXIF data, like get where it is and then fill in the holes of like that environment and be able to recreate like those memory snapshots that were taken from photos to then actually create the full 3D volumetric version of that.
That'd be cool.
To be able to relive memories that way. I'd love to see that. Or to make volumetric video.
Awesome.
Two things. I really do think there's something to this, and maybe 10 to 20 years we'll be able to do it. But like we have events covered from so many different cameras, and like be able to combine those camera angles into one volumetric video of like, let's say, sports games from way back, or even events and concerts, all these things that like were taken for the past 50 to 100 years, be able to like actually update them to a new 3D format would be amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we just got two really cool ideas. We've we've talked about so much stuff earlier. This might be Creator Chat number 7 and number 8. We'll see. But yeah, now let's break over to the chat question.